Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert live in a small village called Avonlea in Canada. Their home, Green Gables, is a modest farmhouse where only the two of them reside. Both have grown quite old. One morning, after getting ready, Matthew joins Marilla for breakfast. Once done, he heads to the train station for an errand. At the train station, Matthew notices a little girl sitting outside. Their eyes meet for a moment before he steps inside. He asks the station master about the boy he was supposed to pick up from the Nova Scotia asylum, but there is no sign of him anywhere. The station master informs him that only a girl has arrived and is still waiting outside. Saying this, he begins closing the station. Matthew is stunned by the news. Stepping outside, he approaches the girl, who introduces herself as Anne with an E. She is extremely talkative and affectionate, expressing deep gratitude for being adopted. Overwhelmed, Matthew realizes he cannot leave her alone at the station. He asks her to come along. On the way back, she keeps chatting endlessly. Meanwhile, as Marilla waits at home for Matthew, her best friend and childhood classmate, Rachel, who is also their neighbor, arrives. Curious, Rachel asks where Matthew has gone so early in the morning. Marilla explains that he has gone to the train station because they have decided to adopt a boy from the orphanage. Rachel is shocked and immediately warns her that this is a terrible decision. She insists that orphans cannot be trusted, recalling past incidents where they either harmed their adoptive parents or set houses on fire before running away. Marilla, however, remains firm. She assures Rachel that nothing like that will happen. Both she and Matthew are getting old, and they need a boy who can help with farm work and take care of them. Rachel falls silent, but leaves with a final remark, telling Marilla not to say she wasn't warned. On the way back to Green Gables, Anne talks endlessly. She describes everything around her in the most beautiful way and even starts giving names to things. Her imagination and enthusiasm slowly impress Matthew. At one point, she hesitates and asks if her constant chatter bothers him. He reassures her that she can talk as much as she wants. When they finally reach Green Gables, Marilla is shocked to see a girl with Matthew. She immediately asks who she is and why he didn't bring the boy. Matthew explains that there was no boy at the station, only this girl. Marilla is frustrated, reminding him that she clearly stated in her letter to Mrs. Spencer that they needed a boy. She blames the orphanage for the mistake and decides to visit Mrs. Spencer the next day to fix it. Matthew defends his decision, saying he couldn't leave a little girl alone at the station. Marilla, however, remains firm. She insists that Anne must leave the next day since they need a boy to help with farm work. Hearing this, Anne is heartbroken. Tears stream down her face as she pleads to stay, promising to do all the work properly. Marilla allows her to stay for the night, but makes it clear that she must leave the next day. Anne, still hopeful, insists she can handle both house chores and farm work, but Marilla refuses to change her mind. At dinner, Anne is too upset to eat. She quietly leaves the table and goes to the room Marilla had shown her, spending the entire night crying. Meanwhile, at the dining table, Matthew suggests they could keep her and hire a boy for farm work instead, but Marilla refuses, insisting that they need a boy because a girl would be of no help. Matthew, lost in thought, eventually falls silent. The next morning, Anne wakes up knowing she has to say goodbye to what felt like a beautiful dream. She looks around the room, taking in every detail for the last time. Just then, Marilla enters. Seeing Anne holding her bag, she suspects her of stealing something and immediately searches it. To her surprise, only flowers fall out. Anne explains that she just wanted to take something as a memory, but Marilla coldly removes even the flowers from her bag. After that, Anne joins them for breakfast, eating properly this time. She thanks them sincerely for letting her stay for a day and assures them that she is not disappointed. Then, Marilla takes her to Mrs. Spencer to resolve the situation. As they leave, Matthew softly tells Anne that he likes her, but circumstances won't allow them to keep her. Overwhelmed with emotion, Anne hugs him, saying that just knowing someone likes her is enough for her. On the way, Anne starts talking to Marilla nonstop, describing Green Gables, the river, the road, and many other things with excitement. She is naturally talkative, and Marilla listens in silence. Finally, they reach Mrs. Spencer's house. Marilla tells her they had asked for a boy, not a girl. Mrs. Spencer apologizes, explaining that she thought a girl would be suitable. She then suggests that a nearby woman is looking for a household helper for her children, and Anne could work there. The three of them, Mrs. Spencer, Marilla, and Anne, go to meet the woman. However, she turns out to be extremely strict, with many children to take care of. Seeing this, Anne becomes visibly frightened. Mrs. Spencer asks Marilla if this is her final decision. By now, Marilla has softened. She cannot bring herself to leave Anne there, realizing there is much work at home that Anne could help with. Finally, she decides to take Anne back. saying she will think it over. She tells Anne that she is still on a probation period, and they will observe her behavior for 2 weeks before making a final decision. Back at Green Gables, Anne is overjoyed and Matthew is just as happy to see her return. However, Marilla remains firm, reminding them that Anne is still on probation. The next morning, Marilla goes to wake Anne but finds her missing. Worried, she looks around and finally finds her outside, gathering eggs from the barn. Marilla tells her not to leave her room before breakfast and insists she must follow proper discipline. Anne realizes that if she wants to stay, she must do all the farm chores properly. Determined, she gets to work, eager to prove herself. Rachel comes to Marilla's house to meet Anne. However, instead of a warm introduction, she starts making negative comments about Anne, criticizing her appearance and behavior. Already sensitive, Anne cannot tolerate it and reacts harshly, speaking rudely to Rachel. Upset, she runs away and hides, crying in a distant corner of the farm. Later, when she returns, Matthew and Marilla scold her for her behavior and insist that she apologize. But Anne, stubborn as ever, refuses outright. Marilla is deeply troubled by this because Rachel is her good friend. The tension in the house grows until Matthew decides to talk to Anne personally. He goes to her room, gently explaining that apologizing doesn't lower one's dignity. At first, Anne resists, but Matthew's kind words touch her heart. Eventually, she agrees to apologize. The next morning, Anne goes to Rachel's house with Marilla. In an overly dramatic way, she kneels at Rachel's feet and apologizes sincerely. Rachel, impressed by her unusual but heartfelt apology, finally forgives her. However, when Anne returns home, she is shocked to find a boy named Jerry working at the farm. Assuming that Marilla and Matthew have decided to replace her, she gets angry. She confronts Jerry, telling him to leave because his presence could reduce her chances of staying. Jerry, confused by her reaction, doesn't understand why she is so upset. Anne goes to Matthew, convinced that hiring Jerry means they no longer want her. Frustrated, she asks why they are pretending otherwise. Matthew reassures her, explaining that Jerry was hired to handle farm work so Marilla wouldn't feel overwhelmed. He also points out that Anne can help with household chores, which would make Marilla happy. Hearing this, Anne's worries disappear, and she excitedly rushes back to help Marilla. Meanwhile, their neighbor William passes by and asks Matthew if the rumors are true, that they adopted a girl from an orphanage. Matthew confirms it. Matthew mentions that his daughter Diana is the same age as Anne, and they could be friends, but William expresses concerns in knowing more about Anne before allowing their children to spend time together. Matthew feels a bit uneasy, but remains polite. Before leaving, William invites them over for tea the next day. Later, Matthew tells Marilla and Anne about the invitation. He also mentions that Diana will be there, hoping Anne will make a new friend. However, instead of excitement, Anne freezes. Memories of her past flood her mind, how she was often bullied and left out because of her talkative nature. The thought of meeting new people terrifies her. On the other hand, Marilla, knowing Anne has nothing suitable to wear, sews her a new dress for the occasion. The next morning, as Marilla and Anne get ready for tea at the Williams house, Anne approaches Marilla nervously. She wonders what will happen if she fails to befriend Diana. Marilla, however, reminds her that impressing Diana's mother, Eliza, is more important. She explains that Diana is under her mother's strict control, and only Eliza approval matters. This makes Anne even more anxious. Determined to make a good impression, she rehearses her manners carefully. Upon arriving, Eliza greets them warmly at the gate, accompanied by her 2 daughters. She welcomes them into the house. After some introductions, Anne and Diana go for a walk. At first, Anne stays unusually quiet, hesitant to speak, but Diana, being kind and friendly, keeps the conversation going. Gradually, Anne begins to open up, and soon, they are chatting comfortably. By the end of their time together, they feel an instant connection and declare themselves best friends. With excitement, they make a solemn promise to remain friends forever, sealing the beginning of a deep and meaningful bond. After returning home, Marilla is pleased with Anne's behavior, as she had made a good impression on the Williams family. Marilla is wearing a cherished brooch, a keepsake from her mother, and she asks Anne to place her scarf and brooch in her room. While doing so, Anne cannot resist trying on the brooch. She gets lost in her imagination, playing for a while before carefully placing the brooch and scarf on Marilla's chair before heading to her room. That night, as Anne finishes her prayers, Marilla enters the room, looking serious. She says the brooch is missing and demands Anne return it. Knowing how much Anne admired it, Marilla is certain she took it. Anne insists she placed it back exactly where it was, but Marilla refuses to believe her. She accuses Anne of stealing and gives her an ultimatum. If she confesses, she can stay without further questioning. Feeling trapped, Anne tearfully lies, saying she took the brooch, played with it near the lake, and accidentally dropped it in the water. Marilla, furious, declares that Anne can no longer stay in the house. No matter how much Anne pleads, crying at her feet and swearing innocence, Marilla refuses to listen. She orders her to pack her things. deciding to send her away early the next morning. At sunrise, Anne is sent off to the train station. Matthew watches in sorrow, his heart heavy with sadness, but he feels powerless to stop it. He silently watches as Anne leaves, deeply troubled by the situation. As Matthew and Marilla sit at the table, Matthew expresses his concern, saying Marilla was too harsh on Anne. He understands the brooch was her mother's last keepsake, but sending Anne away like this was unfair. Feeling upset, he leaves the house and immerses himself in farm work. Meanwhile, Marilla returns to her room and, to her shock, finds the brooch on the chair where Anne had originally placed it. Realizing her mistake, she rushes outside to tell Matthew. Without wasting a second, Matthew mounts his horse and rides at full speed to the train station. But upon reaching, he learns that Anne's train has already departed. Refusing to give up, he spots some acquaintances heading toward Charlottetown and joins them, hoping to find her. Meanwhile, Anne arrives at an orphanage, her mind filled with memories of Green Gables. She feels heartbroken but convinces herself that she will never return. Sitting outside all night, she tries to stay strong. The next morning, as a milkman arrives to make a delivery, she engages him in conversation. With her usual charm and wit, she convinces him to give her a ride to the train station, promising to be of great help. Matthew finally reaches Charlottetown but lacks money for a ship ticket. Determined, he sells his family's pocket watch to afford the journey. Just as he steps outside, he spots a girl who looks like Anne. Rushing toward her, he collides with another passerby and falls unconscious. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself at a stranger's house, where he had been taken for recovery. Ignoring their advice to rest, he immediately resumes his search for Anne and boards a ship to Nova Scotia. He arrives late at night, knocking desperately at the orphanage gate, but no one answers. At dawn, when the gate finally opens, the maid initially fears him, but he quickly explains his urgency. She directs him to meet the matron. When he asks about Anne, the matron informs him that Anne has already been adopted. Shocked, Matthew insists that he and Marilla had originally adopted her, and she was only sent back due to a misunderstanding. The matron, however, denies receiving any girl the previous day. Heartbroken, Matthew steps outside, unsure of what to do next. Just then, the same milkman who had given Anne a ride appears. He mentions that he had met a talkative girl who might be the one Matthew is looking for. Realizing it must be Anne, Matthew asks where she was dropped off. Without wasting time, he rushes toward the station. Finally, he spots Anne among a small crowd, passionately sharing her stories and reciting poetry to gather money for a train ticket. Anne tells Matthew that she has finally found her way, but Matthew apologizes, explaining that it was all a misunderstanding and asks her to return home. Anne refuses, determined to stay independent. As they argue, a man passing by notices and tries to intervene, but Matthew firmly says there's no need because she is his daughter. Hearing this, Anne becomes emotional and throws her arms around him. Overcome with relief, they finally ride back home together. As they arrive, Marilla immediately asks Matthew why he took so long, but he, exhausted, simply heads inside. Anne, overjoyed to be back, rushes to Marilla, but Marilla, maintaining her usual stern demeanor, tells her to go to her room while she prepares supper. Misunderstanding this as disappointment, Anne quietly retreats to her room, thinking Marilla isn't happy about her return. The next morning, Anne behaves formally, speaking very little. She later meets Diana and shares her concerns. Diana reassures her, saying Marilla was extremely worried and heartbroken when Anne was gone. But Anne insists that Marilla hasn't even apologized yet. Brushing it off, she decides not to dwell on it, and instead focuses on her happiness at reuniting with Diana. That day, the village holds a picnic, where everyone gathers to enjoy the event. Anne and Diana are thrilled, excited to have fun together. However, Diana notices that her mother, Eliza, isn't entirely comfortable with their friendship. She worries that Anne, being an orphan, is still an unknown figure, making her uneasy about how close the two have become. When Marilla, Matthew, and Anne finally arrive at the picnic, the other girls immediately start whispering and speaking against Anne, criticizing her harshly. Unable to bear it, she runs off into the woods, overwhelmed with emotions. Marilla follows her and, upon reaching her, finally expresses her feelings. She admits that she was too harsh and apologizes, assuring Anne that she loves her deeply. Hearing this, Anne, filled with emotion, embraces her. Marilla gently reassures her that, in time, everything will fall into place. The next morning, when Anne comes downstairs, she is met with an unexpected surprise. Marilla and Matthew have made a final decision to officially make her a part of their family. Anne, taken aback, is overwhelmed by this moment, struggling to believe it's real. With immense joy, she signs the official documents, legally making her their daughter. From that moment on, she is no longer just Anne. She becomes Anne Cuthbert. The next day, Anne gets ready for school with great enthusiasm. She wants to make a perfect first impression and hopes to make friends. As she comes downstairs, nervousness takes over. She tries to assure herself that academics won't be an issue. She is confident in her studies. However, her real concern is her appearance. She worries that she isn't pretty enough. Marilla, noticing her distress, reassures her that such thoughts are unnecessary and that beauty doesn't define a person. Upon reaching school, Diana warmly greets her and introduces her to the other girls in class. However, a girl named Josie immediately starts mocking Anne, making fun of the complex words she uses. The others struggle to understand her vocabulary, finding it odd. Diana defends her, explaining that Anne loves to read and has a vast knowledge of words. Just then, a boy named Billy also begins teasing Anne. Sensing the tension, Diana quickly takes Anne outside to show her around the school and help her feel more comfortable. While exploring, they come across a surprising scene through a window. Their teacher, Mr. Phillips, and a student named Prissy are standing unusually close. Anne, watching intently, blurts out that they must be making babies. Diana, confused, asks what she means. With a mischievous tone, Anne explains that since Mr. Phillips has his hands in his front pockets, there must be a mouse inside, and Prissy is helping him, because that's how babies are made. Diana bursts into laughter and the two walk away, giggling at Anne's peculiar logic. During recess, all the girls gather around Anne, excitedly asking about Mr. Phillips and Prissy. They want to know exactly what she saw and whether Prissy touched Mr. Phillips's pet mouse, as Anne had described. Without hesitation, she shares that where she used to live, her mistress often had similar, intimate relations with her landlord. The girls immediately become uncomfortable, realizing what she means. Awkward silence spreads, and one by one they walk away, leaving Anne behind, labeling her as problematic. Diana, sensing the situation, promises to see what she can do and also leaves. Later, as Anne and Diana head home together, they share a warm hug. Diana assures her that she will try her best to make things right so that they can fit in. They part ways, and Anne reaches home. Upon entering, she notices that Rachel is visiting. Marilla asks about her first day at school, and Anne enthusiastically shares that it went just as she had expected. She expresses gratitude for the opportunity to study in such a wonderful environment. Wanting to be helpful, she offers to assist Marilla in the kitchen after putting away her belongings. Both Marilla and Rachel appreciate her gesture. That evening, Anne completes her homework and prepares for the next day, determined to make it a good one. The next morning, she sets off for school with renewed optimism. On her way, Billy approaches her and coldly tells her that his sister, Prissy, cried all night because of what Anne said. Anne immediately feels guilty and sincerely apologizes, but Billy doesn't let it go. He continues mocking her and gets uncomfortably close, attempting to intimidate her. Just then, a boy named Gilbert appears. He has been away on vacation and has just returned to school. Billy, caught off guard by Gilbert's presence, quickly backs off and leaves. Anne, still shaken, runs away despite Gilbert trying to stop her. When she enters the classroom, Gilbert holds the door open for her. Though still flustered, she thanks him. As she introduces herself to the class, the boys excitedly greet Gilbert, thrilled about his return. Meanwhile, Anne heads to the stream, hoping for a moment of peace. However, the other girls soon arrive, and Josie wastes no time in taunting her. She declares that none of them can talk to or even look at Anne anymore, because Ruby has secretly liked Gilbert for the past 3 years. Stunned, Anne assures them that she has nothing to do with Gilbert and promises never to speak to him or even glance his way. Satisfied, the girls leave. Diana, feeling bad, tells Anne that she will try to smooth things over. Then, she too walks away, leaving Anne alone once again. Meanwhile, Marilla and Matthew visit a grocery shop where they meet a school mom. She speaks with Marilla, suggesting that it would be better if Anne studied at home under her supervision instead of attending school. Marilla is caught off guard, unable to understand why people are against Anne being in school, so she remains silent. On the way back, Matthew asks her what's going on and why all the school moms think Anne shouldn't be there. Marilla, still confused, says they will find out soon enough. At school, Mr. Phillips introduces a poetry lesson, and for the first time, Anne feels excited. She finally finds something she's good at. First, Diana reads a poem, then Anne takes her turn, delivering it with full imagination and enthusiasm. The class bursts into laughter, mocking her exaggerated expressions. But Gilbert, unlike the others, genuinely praises her, saying she shouldn't be ridiculed for it. Later, when Anne steps out of the classroom, Gilbert approaches, offering her an apple. From the window, the girls watch closely, whispering among themselves. Anne, however, tells Gilbert to leave and not speak to her anymore, as he is only making things harder for her. He doesn't understand what he did wrong, but Anne simply walks away. Meanwhile, Matthew visits Rachel's house to learn more about the situation. Rachel, already aware of the whole story, tells him everything. When he returns home, he discusses it with Marilla, who is furious. Wondering what trouble Anne has caused now, she refuses to tolerate such things. But Matthew, more concerned than angry, explains that the real issue isn't what Anne said. It's why she even knows about such things at her age. A child shouldn't be aware of such matters. The thought of what she must have experienced before coming to them troubles him deeply. Even Marilla, usually opinionated, is left saddened by it. Finally, she leaves. lost in her own thoughts. Marilla visits Prissy's mother to discuss Anne and the recent incident. However, Prissy's mother refuses to let her inside, furiously blaming Anne for ruining her daughter's reputation. She claims that because of Anne, their family is being humiliated throughout Avonlea. She also criticizes Marilla for bringing Anne into their home in the first place. Marilla, usually composed, loses her patience and raises her voice, defending Anne. She insists that Anne is not responsible for any of this, as no one knows what she has been through or what kind of environment she was exposed to in the past. None of it is her fault. Instead of blaming her, they should be grateful that she finally has a safe home where she can live in peace. With that, Marilla storms out, unwilling to tolerate further accusations. At school, Gilbert tries to talk to Anne, but she completely ignores him. Determined, he places an apple on her desk as a peace offering. Still, she doesn't acknowledge him. Frustrated, he lightly tugs at her hair, teasing her. Anne, boiling with anger, grabs her slate and smashes it over his head, shouting that she will never talk to him. Instead of getting angry, Gilbert laughs, saying that at least she finally spoke to him. The other girls watching grow furious. Mr. Phillips, witnessing the scene, punishes Anne by making her stand in front of the entire class. Gilbert, feeling guilty, stands up and takes the blame, admitting that he was the one who provoked her. However, Mr. Phillips dismisses his defense, making Anne take the punishment alone. Humiliated and unable to bear the embarrassment, Anne rushes out of the classroom, grabs her belongings, and runs home. Once inside, she throws herself into Marilla's arms, crying uncontrollably. Through her sobs, she declares that she will never return to school again because she absolutely hates it. Marilla, seeing her distress, gently comforts her. Anne stays home for several days, refusing to go back to school. Marilla feels confused and unsure of what to do, so she seeks advice from Rachel. Rachel insists that strictness is necessary. Children should not be given too much freedom. Marilla listens carefully and decides to think it over. When she returns home, she finds Anne completely lost in her imagination, spinning stories while the food she was supposed to be cooking has burned, filling the kitchen with smoke. Furious, Marilla scolds her, blaming her daydreaming for such carelessness. She firmly declares that Anne must return to school, and there will be no more discussion about it. Anne protests, saying school isn't right for her, but Marilla refuses to listen. Her decision is final. Heartbroken, Anne runs off in distress. Later, Marilla talks to Matthew, explaining that going to school is essential for Anne's future. Matthew agrees, and the next day, Anne is forced to attend school. When she returns home, she surprises everyone by announcing that she had a wonderful day. She happily shares that her classmates were kind, and she enjoyed every moment. A few days later, Diana and Ruby visit Green Gables. When Marilla greets them, they reveal that they've come to see Anne, wanting to apologize and make things right because she is not coming to school for the past several days. However, Marilla, taken aback, tells them that Anne is currently asleep. The girls look disappointed and leave, but Marilla grows suspicious. She starts to wonder where Anne has been going if she isn't at school. Anne secretly built a little hideaway in the forest, decorated it with pine cones and other natural treasures. She spent her days there, lost in her imagination. Each evening, she returned home, pretended she had been at school. That evening, Anne is caught off guard when she notices her books and basket on the table, the very ones Diana and Ruby had brought over. Shocked, she realizes the truth has been exposed. Matthew and Marilla, deeply concerned, decide to call the village minister, hoping he can talk some sense into Anne. However, the minister turns out to be a narrow-minded man. Instead of encouraging her education, he suggests that it's fine if Anne struggles with school, since her future lies in household duties anyway. He believes she should focus on cooking and homemaking because her ultimate purpose is to please her future husband. His words leave Anne and Marilla stunned into silence. Later, Anne expresses her frustration, calling the minister close-minded, but Marilla remains quiet, simply listening. Anne then meets Jerry and shares her thoughts. She tells him he's lucky to be a boy because he can do whatever he wants, but Jerry points out that she's speaking as if he has endless opportunities, which makes her pause. She then admits she has never thought about what kind of wife she would be. She has a terrible temper and isn't even beautiful. Jerry, amused, teases her, which only makes Anne angrier. Annoyed, she tells him to leave. That night, while Anne is asleep, loud sirens suddenly ring through the village, waking everyone. She rushes outside with Marilla and Matthew, only to see a house engulfed in flames. It belongs to Ruby and her family. Villagers scramble to put out the fire, carrying buckets of water. In the chaos, Anne rushes into the burning house. Diana spots her going inside and panics. Everyone worries about how she will escape. Moments later, Anne emerges and the flames start to weaken. She explains that she read in a fire safety book that fire spreads with oxygen, so she shut all windows and doors to slow it down. Impressed, the minister thanks her, calling her a brave and intelligent girl. Anne feels a sense of pride. After the fire, Ruby's parents ask Marilla if Ruby can stay with them for a few days until they find a new home. Ruby, still upset, refuses to stay with Anne, fearing it will ruin her friendships. But her parents insist, reminding her to be grateful that the Cuthberts are willing to take her in. Teary-eyed, Ruby has no choice but to agree. Later, Diana comforts Ruby, saying that what others think of Anne doesn't matter. What matters is what Ruby thinks of her. Moreover, she says that she sees Anne as a brave and wonderful girl. At Green Gables, Ruby feels miserable. That night, as they share a bed, she quietly cries. Anne gently comforts her, recalling how she also cried on her first night there. To distract Ruby, she starts telling her stories. Slowly, Ruby's mood brightens and they grow closer. The next day, Anne suggests they go to see how construction is going on. Ruby, feeling a bit better, takes some bags and heads to the workhouse, where Gilbert and the other children are busy. Seeing Gilbert, she is amazed but doesn't notice how he seems more interested in Anne. Later, Ruby, Diana, and Anne gather in their secret hideout in the woods. They come up with a plan to write one story each week and share them, making it a fun tradition. On Ruby's last night at Green Gables, she finally apologizes to Anne and admits that she will miss her. She also mentions that school is reopening the next day, and she will be attending. After Ruby falls asleep, Anne quietly leaves the room and heads to Marilla's room, where she finds her reading a book. Anne tells Marilla that Ruby is asleep, then brings up the minister's remarks about a woman's role in life. She expresses her discomfort with his views, especially the part about wives having no purpose beyond pleasing their husbands. This time, Marilla doesn't stay silent. She admits that she has also been thinking about it for days. She reassures Anne that the minister's beliefs are old-fashioned and that she can be anything she wants. Marilla encourages her to follow her dreams, work hard, and never let anyone limit her. Hearing this, Anne feels a sense of relief and determination. She finally agrees to return to school. The next day, when she arrives, she is warmly welcomed, especially by Ruby, who happily invites her to sit with the other girls. Mr. Phillips organizes a spelling competition in the class, and as he observes, he notices that Anne is still being ignored by some students. One by one, students get eliminated until only Anne and Gilbert remain. In the final round, Gilbert makes a mistake, and Anne wins. She feels incredibly happy about her victory. The next day, Gilbert is about to leave for school when he briefly meets his father, who is suffering from a terminal illness. Since he is running late, he quickly leaves for school without much conversation. Meanwhile, at school, Anne, who has just experienced her first menstruation, is discussing it with the other girls. They warn her that if a girl gets her period during class, she will be completely humiliated. This frightens Anne, making her anxious about the whole situation. Later, during the lesson, Mr. Phillips asks Anne a question, but due to her anxiety over the discussion with the girls, she freezes and is unable to answer. After school, when everyone is preparing to leave, Gilbert offers to help Anne with her studies and suggests using mnemonics to remember things easily. However, Anne refuses his help, stating that she doesn't need anyone's support. At home, Anne finally confides in Marilla, expressing her frustration and confusion about menstruation. She questions why it even happens. To distract her, Marilla suggests inviting Diana over for a visit. Hearing this, Anne becomes extremely excited. Marilla also mentions that she can serve Diana the cherry cordial she had prepared earlier. Anne starts preparing for Diana's visit with great enthusiasm. However, when Diana arrives and Anne goes to serve her the drink, she mistakenly picks up the wrong bottle. The wine and the cordial look almost the same, leading them to drink an entire bottle of wine instead. As the alcohol takes effect, both girls become overly excited, laughing uncontrollably, and behaving in a silly and exaggerated manner. They speak nonsense and act in ways they normally wouldn't, completely unaware of the mix-up. Meanwhile, Matthew secretly visits a shop to buy a new dress for Anne. He knows she has always wanted puffed sleeves, but Marilla never allowed it. Though hesitant, he enters the shop, which belongs to his old crush, Jeannie. Feeling awkward, he quickly explains Anne's preference and provides a sample size. Understanding how special this dress is for Anne, Jeannie assures him that she will make it exactly as she imagines. Being a widow, she still has a deep appreciation for Matthew. On the other hand, when Eliza arrives at the Cuthbert house to pick up Diana, she finds both girls in a drunken state. Shocked, she immediately scolds them. Marilla, noticing the situation, smells the bottle and realizes it was wine instead of cordial. She tries to explain that it was a mistake. She had intended to discard the wine long ago, but accidentally kept it because the bottles looked similar. However, Eliza is furious. She refuses to listen, calls it an unforgivable mistake, and declares that Anne is a bad influence. Despite Marilla's attempts to reason with her, she takes Diana away, leaving Anne in tears. The next day at school, Anne and Diana sit together as usual, but Mr. Phillips, aware of the incident, punishes them by separating them and making them sit at the back of the class. During recess, they sit together, upset, and promise to do whatever it takes to convince their parents. They tearfully vow never to abandon each other. Later, Mr. Phillips gives Anne some books to deliver to Gilbert's house, as he has been absent from school for days. He acknowledges Gilbert as one of the brightest students and doesn't want him to fall behind. Anne hesitates, but before she can protest, the teacher dismisses her concerns, leaving her with no choice but to take the books to Gilbert's home. When Anne reaches Gilbert's house, she quickly hands over the books and returns home. As she enters her room, she notices something unexpected on her bed, a beautifully made dress with puffed sleeves. Overwhelmed with joy, she holds the dress close, deeply touched by his kindness. Excitedly, she tries it on. For the first time, she truly feels like a princess, just as she had always dreamed. Happiness radiates from her as she admires herself, unable to contain her gratitude. The next day, dressed in her beautiful new gown, she joins Matthew and Marilla as they head to Sunday church together, her heart full of joy and appreciation. One stormy night, as heavy rain pours outside, Anne sleeps soundly in her bed. Suddenly, Diana rushes into the house, waking her up in a panic. She explains that her little sister, Minnie May, is seriously ill, coughing uncontrollably and struggling to breathe. Alarmed, Anne immediately realizes that it's croup. Diana anxiously asks if Marilla is home, but Anne informs her that she, like most of the villagers, has gone to premiere. Diana's parents are also at the premiere, leaving only her Aunt Josephine, who has no idea how to handle the situation. Without wasting time, Anne wakes Matthew and tells him to fetch a doctor, while she hurries to Diana's house. Upon reaching, she quickly takes charge, helping Minnie May expel the mucus blocking her airway. Slowly, the little girl's breathing stabilizes. Diana watches in amazement as Anne calmly handles the crisis, explaining that she has seen this condition before in the orphanage and knows exactly what to do. Even Diana's skeptical aunt is deeply impressed by Anne's quick thinking and courage. The next morning, Marilla returns home and learns about everything that happened. Soon after, Eliza arrives as well. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she apologizes to Marilla, admitting she had misjudged Anne. She acknowledges that Anne saved her daughter's life and finally agrees to let Diana and Anne be friends again. Overjoyed, the two girls happily reunite as best friends. Not long after, Gilbert's father passes away due to his terminal illness. The entire village gathers for the funeral, but Gilbert, lost in grief, avoids speaking to anyone. Anne approaches him, trying to comfort him, but he responds coldly, leaving her stunned. Later at home, she regrets her reaction, realizing she was too harsh. Feeling contemplative, she asks Marilla why she never married. Marilla opens up, revealing that after her brother Michael's death, her mother became very ill, leaving her responsible for managing the household. Life simply passed by and she never had the chance to consider marriage. Anne feels a deep sadness for her, especially when she notices Michael's old photograph. A sudden thought strikes her, and she rushes out of the house heading towards Gilbert. But as she arrives, she finds the house locked and eerily empty, a wave of unease washing over her. The next day, while all the children are excitedly preparing for Christmas, Josie suddenly reveals shocking news. She claims the Cuthberts are now poor. She explains that her uncle, the bank manager, mentioned having a meeting with Matthew at the bank where he mortgaged Green Gables to borrow money. This revelation surprises many, and Anne overhears it as well. Stunned, she feels a deep shock. The other children speculate whether the Cuthberts will still keep her or send her away, which only fuels Anne's anger. Instead of engaging, she silently walks away. At home, she arrives to find Marilla and Matthew already in a heated discussion. Marilla, deeply concerned, questions him about the situation. Matthew explains that their farm hasn't been doing well for the past few years, but he remains hopeful that things will improve, allowing him to repay the bank. However, Marilla doesn't share his optimism and continues to argue, pointing out that he didn't consider how this would affect both of them, and especially Anne. Overwhelmed by stress, Matthew suddenly collapses, suffering a minor heart attack. Panicked, Marilla rushes to his side. The doctor arrives and advises complete rest, reassuring them that he will recover gradually. That night, Marilla stays up, struggling to go through their finances, but she finds it difficult to understand everything. Seeing her distress, Anne steps in to help, determined to support her family. The next day, they visit the bank to discuss their options. To their dismay, the bank informs them that they must repay the loan within the permitted time or Green Gables will be sold. This devastating news leaves them shaken. With no other choice, Marilla makes a heartbreaking decision. She will start selling their household belongings. She even parts with the cherished brooch her mother gave her. Moved by her sacrifice, Anne also resolves to return the dress Matthew had gifted her. However, Marilla firmly declares that they will not accept a single penny in charity. The Cuthberts are not a charity case. They are a family, and no matter what hardships come their way, they will face them together. Marilla stays home to take care of Matthew, while Jerry and Anne head to Charlottetown to sell their belongings. Anne also takes her cherished dress to sell. At the shop, Jeannie learns about the Cuthberts' financial struggles. Without saying a word, she secretly hands all the money she has to Anne. Grateful but overwhelmed, Anne continues selling the rest of their belongings. Meanwhile, outside, Jerry is attacked by two strangers. They beat him up and steal his money, leaving him injured on the ground. When Anne steps out of the store, she unexpectedly runs into Gilbert, who offers her tea. They sit in a small shop where he shares his plans. He's leaving town to travel the world. He wants to explore and see life beyond Avonlea. As they step out of the shop, Jerry arrives, injured and ashamed. He tells Anne everything, but there's nothing they can do now. The stolen money is gone. Back home, Matthew, deeply troubled, talks to Marilla, blaming himself for everything. He mentions his life insurance, suggesting that if he were gone, all their troubles would be solved. The next day, while Marilla is in the barn milking the cow, Matthew slowly makes his way downstairs, using his cane for support. Alone and lost in despair, he retrieves a gun, deciding to end his suffering. Just as he is about to act, Jeannie unexpectedly enters the room. Shocked, the gun slips from his hands. She talks to him, her words filled with concern and understanding. Marilla soon finds out what happened. The weight of the situation shakes her, and she tells Matthew that his loss would have only brought more pain, making things even harder for both of them, and especially for Anne. Deeply moved, Matthew promises never to think that way again. That evening, Marilla and Anne sit together, counting the money they managed to gather from selling everything. Despite their efforts, it's still not enough. Lost in thought, both silently wonder how they will save Green Gables. Anne, determined to help, decides to earn money by offering her services to people in town. She starts working, hoping to contribute whatever little she can. Meanwhile, Marilla places an advertisement in the newspaper announcing that Green Gables is open for boarders. Unexpectedly, the ones who respond to the ad are the same two strangers who had robbed Jerry. Unaware of their past actions, the Cuthberts warmly welcome them into their home, relieved that they have found a way to earn some money. A beautiful morning fills the air with joy as Anne, lost in her own world, sings happily. She climbs a tree, talking to it as if it were a dear friend, feeling completely at peace. When she returns home, she eagerly shares her experience with Marilla, telling her about the most beautiful tree she has ever seen. However, Marilla is more concerned about Anne's shoes, which are covered in mud. Instead of listening to her excitement, she strictly tells her to clean them before entering the house. Later at the dinner table, the two boarders, one named Dunlop and the other Nate, who introduces himself as a geologist, join them. At Nate's request, they all say grace before eating. Marilla seems drawn to Nate, intrigued by his presence. The next day, while Marilla is washing her hair, Nate suddenly comes downstairs. Startled, she apologizes, saying she didn't realize he was still upstairs. He reassures her, complimenting her beauty in a charming manner. His words make her flustered, and after a brief exchange, he steps outside. Once outside, Nate meets Dunlop. With a sly smirk, he tells him that today is the day they will set their trap, making it easy to fool everyone. The two men seem quite pleased with their plan. Meanwhile, Anne sits in the barn, deeply engrossed in a book. Jerry arrives, expressing his unease about the boarders. He tells Anne that something feels off about them and that he is sure he has seen them somewhere before. Anne, however, dismisses his worries, saying that Nate even gave her a book, a fascinating geological read. She suggests that Jerry should read it too. This frustrates him, and he reminds her that he doesn't go to school. Realizing her mistake, Anne gently suggests that she could teach him how to read. Jerry falls silent, unsure how to respond. Later, Anne, Diana, and Ruby meet at the wooden house once again, critiquing each other's stories with excitement. During their discussion, Diana shares surprising news. She has received a letter from the Aunt Josephine, requesting her to submit the stories Anne has been writing. Thrilled by the opportunity, Anne suggests they all select a few stories together and send them. The girls feel overjoyed by this prospect. Nate mocks Jerry for struggling with his alphabets, telling him learning isn't for him. Just then, Anne arrives, engrossed in the geology book. Annoyed, Nate questions why she isn't bored yet and suddenly snatches it away. Unfazed, Anne takes it back, insisting she's not done. Frustrated, Nate walks away. After he leaves, Jerry turns to Anne and warns her that Nate is not a good man. Curious, Anne asks why, but Jerry avoids answering and walks off. She calls after him, asking if he won't take his lesson today, but he simply replies that he's not in the mood to study. That night, Dunlop and Nate sit at the table downstairs discussing. They know Anne is upstairs, secretly listening to their conversation. They talk about a gold discovery in Avonlea, with Nate saying he won't inform his company about it. Instead, he plans to share the information with the people there, making them wealthy. However, he seems uncertain, unable to make a firm decision. Anne, hearing all this, is filled with curiosity. She heads back to her room, but the excitement and mystery of what she overheard keep her awake all night. Meanwhile, Dunlop and Nate feel pleased, believing that their plan will spread through the village soon, especially since Anne is known for her curiosity and love for sharing information. The next day, Anne rushes to Rachel's house, initially hesitant but eventually spilling everything she overheard. Rachel, being even more talkative than Anne, wastes no time in spreading the news all over Avonlea. Soon, a gathering is called at the town hall where the entire community assembles, buzzing with excitement. The crowd is restless, eager to hear more. Finally, Rachel arranges for Nate to address the people. He confidently confirms the rumor, claiming that there's a strong chance of gold being buried beneath Avonlea's land. He states that it is his duty to report this discovery to his company. When asked for proof, he presents a fake certificate from New York, making everyone believe him. Then, he introduces his next step. Everyone should collect soil samples from their land for testing, which will cost $150 per test. The crowd falls silent, shocked by the high price. Seeing their hesitation, Nate assures them that he understands their concerns and won't force anyone. Pretending to be selfless, he starts to walk away. Dunlop challenges Nate, questioning why he would leave if gold truly exists. Wouldn't he report it and oversee the mining himself? Nate hesitates, but Dunlop pushes further. The townspeople agree, urging Nate to stay and prove his claim. With their plan unfolding perfectly, Nate and Dunlop exchange pleased glances. Meanwhile, Anne, deep in thought, considers writing a letter to Gilbert about the gold discovery. However, as she searches for paper, she struggles to find a blank page. Eventually, she sneaks into Nate's room, hoping to find something to write on. There, she stumbles upon a page bearing the same New York stamp Nate had shown earlier, a clear sign that the certificate was fabricated. She quickly takes the paper and rushes back to her room. Later, when Nate returns to his room, he notices that things seem slightly out of place. As he looks around, he quickly realizes that the forged page is missing. His face hardens as the truth dawns on him. Anne had been in his room and had taken the page. Anger flares within him, but instead of reacting immediately, he controls himself, knowing he must handle the situation carefully. The next morning at breakfast, Marilla firmly states that they won't be getting their farm soil tested for gold because it's too expensive. Nate, trying to maintain his act, reassures her that gold is guaranteed, but there's always a little risk. He leaves the decision to them. Anne, however, looks disappointed, insisting that they must get the soil tested. On the way to school, Anne tells Diana about Nate's soil samples. Despite looking through the microscope, she saw no gold, yet he insisted it was there. Feeling pressured, she pretended to agree. Now she feels uneasy, while Diana suggests Nate's experience might mean he's right. However, Anne remains doubtful. Later in class, one of Anne's classmates, Cole, who loves drawing, is busy sketching. Billy, being his usual troublemaking self, ruins his drawing. When Mr. Phillips notices, he scolds Cole, claiming that drawing is for girls and that he shouldn't be wasting time during lessons. As punishment, Cole is humiliated in front of everyone. Anne is deeply upset by this injustice. During break, Cole sits alone, eating in silence. Seeing this, Anne decides to sit with him, showing her support. Slowly, the other girls follow her lead, joining them. A sense of warmth spreads as Cole, though usually reserved, feels included for the first time. At home, Dunlop gives Anne a letter, revealing his aunt left him her entire inheritance. However, he admits the wealth means nothing compared to her love. As a final gesture, he gifts Anne a pen, which she happily accepts, unaware it leaks. Secretly, he hopes the ink will ruin her writing, forcing her to discard the paper. That day, Marilla styles her hair to impress Nate, something Matthew quietly notices. However, Nate shows no interest in her. Meanwhile, William hosts a large settlement party at his home. He offers financial help to those who can't afford soil testing, agreeing to cover their expenses. In return, if gold is found on their land, he will take a small share of the profits. Many people readily accept this offer, seeing it as an opportunity they otherwise wouldn't have had. At the gathering, Nate offers Marilla a drink, but soon after, he starts flirting with other women. Marilla, feeling hurt, watches in silence, while Matthew observes everything, sensing her disappointment. When they return home, Marilla checks on Anne, who is frightened by her vivid imagination. She comforts her before heading to her own room. Later, Matthew approaches Marilla and reveals his decision. Although their land might have gold, they won't dig up Green Gables. Instead, they want Anne to inherit a complete farm, something she can care for when they are gone. Marilla agrees wholeheartedly, feeling reassured by his words. The next day, after a long practice session, Anne finally sits down to write a letter to Gilbert. However, as soon as she begins, her pen starts leaking, ruining the entire page. Frustrated, she throws it aside, feeling utterly exasperated. The next day, Anne takes another paper from Nate's room, but this time, she makes sure not to leave any marks. She also leaves a note, promising to return both papers. Finally, she finishes writing her letter to Gilbert and decides to send it through Josephine. Meanwhile, Diana, her father, and her mother are planning a trip to Charlottetown to visit Josephine. Since Josephine specifically mentioned in her letter that she wants to see Anne, they invite her along. Excited, Anne happily joins them on the trip. Nate becomes furious upon realizing Anne took another paper. When Dunlop enters, Nate questions him, but he denies any involvement. As they talk, Dunlop reveals their plan to split the swindled money, but admits he wants to settle down, having grown fond of the people. Nate warns they'll never accept him, but Dunlop insists they already have, showing the gun he secretly took from Matthew's chest. Nate falls silent and leaves. Later, Nate drowns his frustration in alcohol at the barn. Jerry happens to see him drinking, and Nate offers him some, but Jerry refuses. Eventually, Nate leaves. Jerry, feeling guilty, apologizes to Matthew, believing that losing the money led to them taking in the boarders. Matthew reassures him, but Jerry insists they are bad people. Concerned, Matthew starts taking the matter seriously. Anne hands her letter to Josephine's coachman, instructing him to make sure it reaches Gilbert no matter what. When Diana's father notices the quality of the paper, he jokingly asks if it's a gold certificate. Diana laughs and says it's just a letter about gold reaching the right person. At this, Josephine sighs in frustration, admitting she is tired of hearing about gold. She recalls a town where something similar happened 10 years ago. A few people claimed they had discovered gold, but in the end, the townspeople were scammed. Many had invested in soil testing, only to lose all their money when no gold was found. The news had even made it to the newspapers back then. Curious, Anne and Diana decide to confirm the story. They visit a newspaper shop to find the old articles. There, they learn that the man who wrote the article is still around, at the bar. Without wasting time, they go to meet him. The man tells them that people often lose their senses when they hear about gold, failing to think rationally. He asks which company the geologist who found the gold works for. Anne realizes that Nate never mentioned any company. She also recalls that when she looked through the microscope, the gold sample looked more like ordinary soil. The man confirms that real gold is always yellow and shiny, never resembling soil in its raw form. Piecing everything together, Anne finally understands that Nate and Dunlop are running a scam. She remembers overhearing them say they would soon leave with all the money. And now, after seeing the fake letter and stamp, it is clear that the so-called gold certificate is also fake. Meanwhile, Eliza catches Anne and Diana at the shop and scolds them, demanding to know what they are doing there. Anne tries to explain, but Eliza refuses to listen and silences them. On the other side, Matthew and Marilla confront the boarders, telling them they need to leave the next morning. They firmly state that they no longer require boarders, giving them only one night to pack and go. The next day, Anne, Diana, and the others return from Charlottetown. William hands all the money over to Nate. As soon as Anne enters the house, she starts acting a bit distant toward Dunlop, refusing to acknowledge him. Instead, she quickly takes Marilla aside into a room and tells her the whole truth. Marilla, without hesitation, assures Anne that she trusts her completely. Meanwhile, Dunlop, sensing trouble, calls Nate and informs him that their secret is out. Realizing they have no time left, they lock Marilla and Anne in a room and try to escape. But Anne and Marilla manage to reach the main entrance and ring the bell. Matthew hears it and rushes to the door. After listening to their urgent words, he wastes no time, grabs his horse, and gathers the townspeople to go after Nate and Dunlop. On the way, Jerry spots the two men and immediately recognizes them as the ones who robbed him in Charlottetown. He tries to stop them, but Nate knocks him down. Just then, Dunlop pulls out a gun and points it at Nate, demanding all the money for himself, but Nate refuses. When Dunlop attempts to fire, the gun jams. Seizing the moment, Nate shoves him backward into a well and runs away. Matthew and the others arrive at the scene just in time. They pull Dunlop out of the well and capture him, while Jerry, still injured, is helped by the townspeople. Meanwhile, Anne's letter finally reaches Gilbert, who is now working as a coal laborer on a ship. He reads it and is completely shocked to learn about the gold in Avonlea, unable to believe what he's reading. Meanwhile, Jeannie sends letters to Matthew daily, but he doesn't even open them. Seeing the pile of letters growing, Anne's curiosity gets the best of her, and she finally gives in, opening one. She shares it with Diana and Ruby, and after some thought, she decides to reply. Pretending to be Matthew, she writes back, and soon, a regular exchange of letters begins between Jeannie and Anne, though Jeannie believes she's writing to Matthew. One night, Matthew accidentally opens a letter where Jeannie mentions previous replies. Realizing what has been happening, he feels deeply disappointed in Anne. He believes she shouldn't have interfered or played with someone's feelings like this. When he confronts her, Anne gets upset and runs off to the barn, breaking down in tears. Meanwhile, Matthew meets Jeannie and clears up everything, explaining that he respects her but doesn't wish for anyone else in his life. He is content with how things are. Jeannie understands and respects his decision. When Matthew returns home, Anne apologizes sincerely, feeling guilty for what she did. He finally forgives her, and peace is restored. Gilbert befriends another coal worker named Sebastian, whom everyone fondly calls Bash. Over time, they grow close, and Gilbert eventually invites Bash to move to Avonlea with him. They make a pact. Both will farm together for 2 years, after which Bash will stay back while Gilbert leaves for further studies. They agree on the plan, looking forward to their future in Avonlea. The next day, while Cole is fixing Anne's hair at school, Mr. Phillips starts mocking him for acting like a girl. This deeply upsets Cole, and Mr. Phillips cruelly sends him out of class. Seeing him distressed, Anne tries to comfort him later, but he refuses to listen. Later, the classmates play a kissing game where each person must kiss someone when their turn comes. When it's Anne's turn, no boy steps forward, and they cruelly say she is the ugliest of all. This deeply hurts her, but to everyone's surprise, Cole steps up and kisses her, silencing the bullies. On her way home, Anne encounters a homeless vendor selling small items. She trades a sandwich for a bottle of black hair dye, excited to change her red hair. Once home, she first drapes a black scarf over her head, imagining how she would look, feeling overjoyed. But when she finally applies the dye, it turns out horribly wrong. Her hair turns an awful green. Devastated, she cries, calling herself a witch. Marilla consoles her, assuring her that she's still young and will grow into her beauty. In the end, Marilla has no choice but to cut Anne's hair short, making her look like a boy. Anne begs Marilla not to send her to the school because everyone will make fun of her because of her hair, but Marilla remains firm, insisting that education is essential. In the end, Anne has no choice but to go. When Anne arrives at school with short hair, everyone stares in shock. That same day, Gilbert returns, and Mr. Phillips mocks her in class. Upset, she tells Marilla how unfair the day was. Everyone teased her, and Gilbert picked the worst time to come back. Marilla, surprised to hear his name, asks about him, and Anne says he seemed fine on the surface. Later, Marilla asks Anne and Jerry to fetch some ingredients from the store while she goes to Gilbert's house. But when she arrives, she finds Bash at the front door and is surprised. Bash introduces himself as Gilbert's friend, and after a brief conversation, Marilla invites Gilbert for Christmas dinner at their house and extends the invitation to Bash as well. Meanwhile, in Charlottetown, Anne disguises herself in boys' clothing, enjoying the freedom of not being recognized. She experiences life from a different perspective, taking on small jobs and even earning some money. At school, while preparing for the Christmas play, Billy pushes Cole off the ladder, injuring his hand and leaving his artwork incomplete. The girls step in to finish it, lifting his spirits. Meanwhile, Bash and Gilbert visit Marilla's house, where Anne excitedly introduces herself before they all enjoy a meal together. Later, at the Grand Hall, the school and villagers have arranged a play. Initially, Anne is given a minor role, but when the lead actor loses his voice, Rachel quickly offers the part to Anne. She, realizing she needs a shovel for her role, sends Matthew to fetch one. The play continues smoothly, and when Anne's turn comes, Matthew arrives just in time with the shovel. The performance turns out to be a great success, filling the hall with laughter and applause. Back home, Anne excitedly tells Marilla that this was the best evening of her life. She feels overjoyed. Soon after, Matthew joins them, and he and Anne start playing marbles together, ending the night on a happy note. The next day, while Marilla is working in the kitchen, Anne comes to help, but Marilla has a severe headache, which Matthew notices. Concerned, he asks if these headaches have started again. Marilla, staying silent for a moment, finally replies that she will be fine, just like before. Later, Aunt Josephine hosts a party in memory of her life partner, Miss Gertie, and invites Anne and Diana. However, Marilla refuses to let them go alone. To convince her, Anne asks Cole to join them. With his company, Marilla finally agrees, and the three set off for the party. At the gathering, everything feels new and unique to them. The atmosphere is welcoming, with no one judging anyone. Anne is asked to read a passage from Miss Gertie's favorite book. She chooses a deeply emotional paragraph, which moves Josephine to tears. Overcome with emotions, she leaves the room. Meanwhile, back home, as Marilla gets up from the bed, she suddenly collapses. Matthew rushes to help her. The next morning, he wakes up early and prepares breakfast, bringing it to her in bed. When Marilla asks why he's doing all this, Matthew reminds her that she spent her entire life taking care of him and their mother. Now, it's his responsibility to take care of her. When Anne returns home, Matthew informs her that Marilla isn't feeling well, but assures her that seeing Anne will surely make her better. Without wasting a moment, Anne rushes to Marilla's side and excitedly shares every detail of the event. She talks about how much she enjoyed the evening and how happy she feels. The next day, Anne excitedly tells Marilla and Matthew about how she recited a poem at the sewing party. As she speaks, Marilla mentions that she has been struggling to read properly, which means she might need glasses. She decides to get her eyesight checked soon. Both Matthew and Anne fully agree, realizing how important it is for her. The next day during class, Bash suddenly enters the classroom looking for Gilbert. When Gilbert approaches him, Bash explains that he has a severe toothache and a fever but can't get medical help because of his skin color. This angers Gilbert, who insists that he knows a doctor who can help, though Bash insists on going to Bog, a town near Charlotte where black people live. Gilbert convinces him to visit the doctor first. Bash finally agrees, and they both leave together. As they board the train, the conductor treats them unfairly because of Bash's skin color, but they manage to board due to Rachel and Marilla's concerns, as they are also on their way to Charlottetown for Marilla's eye checkup. Meanwhile, during recess time in class, Cole starts sculpting with clay, but Billy snatches it and throws it at the window, breaking the glass. Mr. Phillips arrives and immediately blames Cole, accusing him of breaking the window and ordering him to pay for the damage. Cole refuses, and when he speaks up against the unfair punishment, he storms out of the classroom. In Charlottetown, Marilla gets her new glasses and her vision improves. Meanwhile, Gilbert and Bash reach the doctor, Ward, the same one who treated Gilbert's father. Unlike others, the doctor does not discriminate and treats Bash with care. After receiving treatment, Bash starts feeling much better. Seeing the doctor's work, Gilbert asks if he can become his student. Dr. Ward agrees, and they make a deal for Gilbert to train with him every weekend. Meanwhile, at Green Gables, while playing, Anne accidentally breaks Marilla's veil. Feeling guilty, she sincerely apologizes and says she will accept any punishment. However, Marilla reassures her, explaining that this veil belonged to her mother, then to her, and now belongs to Anne. She tells Anne not to worry, and then shows her the brooch she reclaimed from the antique shop. Smiling, she hands it to Anne, saying that one day, this brooch will also be hers. A new teacher, Miss Stacy, arrives at school with modern teaching methods and a unique style, wearing skirts, which excites Anne. The girls whisper about her, intrigued by her different approach. During introductions, Miss Stacy asks the students to sit in a circle and share about themselves. Anne, eager to contribute, starts describing each student, making them uncomfortable. Gently, Miss Stacy advises her to let others speak for themselves and avoid gossip. Anne feels embarrassed afterward. Meanwhile, Gilbert approaches Miss Stacy, explaining that his studies have suffered due to his time away. He requests extra lessons, and she agrees. Later, Miss Stacy gives Anne an assignment on the harms of gossip and the benefits of empathy. Determined to redeem herself, Anne promises to write a thoughtful essay. On the way home, she expresses disappointment to Diana, upset that she made a bad impression. Diana reassures her, saying she is intelligent and will succeed. That night, Anne works diligently on her essay until she falls asleep at the table. By morning, she is horrified to find the lamp's heat has burned her paper. Panicking, she rushes downstairs and pretends to be sick, but Marilla quickly sees through her act. When asked, Anne confesses her essay was ruined and fears Miss Stacy won't believe her. Marilla reassures her and decides to accompany her to school to explain. At school, Marilla meets Miss Stacy and is instantly impressed. The rumors about her being a bad influence don't affect her judgment. Miss Stacy even invites Marilla to stay and observe the class. She agrees, watching as Miss Stacy performs an electricity experiment using potatoes to light a bulb. The students are fascinated, but just then, the Progressive Mothers group, led by Rachel, arrives. They strongly disapprove of Miss Stacy's teaching style, considering it dangerous and improper. Their concerns escalate when a student accidentally breaks the bulb. Using this as an excuse, they warn Miss Stacy before leaving. On the way home, Anne suddenly remembers she had planned to visit her hideout in the jungle, but Marilla refuses to let her go, so she takes Miss Stacy and Marilla with her. When they arrive, they discover sculptures there. Surprised, Anne makes Miss Stacy and Marilla Pinky promise to keep it a secret before revealing that they belong to Cole. She explains that he stopped attending school because he was often bullied by Mr. Phillips. Instead, he comes here to sculpt in peace, showcasing remarkable artistic talent. Miss Stacy is moved by his story and carefully considers how to help him. Later, when Gilbert arrives home, he finds a letter on the table from Bash, who informs him that he is leaving forever. Bash explains that he is moving to a place where he can be with people like him. Shocked, Gilbert realizes he has been unfair to Bash and regrets not giving their discussion more time. Meanwhile, Billy and his group head into the woods to hunt foxes. While wandering, they come across Anne's hideout and mercilessly destroy it, smashing all the sculptures inside. The next morning, when Anne arrives, she is devastated to find everything in ruins. Tears stream down her face as she takes in the destruction. Cole soon arrives and, seeing the wreckage, blames Anne for everything. As Cole looks around, he spots Billy's scarf on the ground and instantly realizes who was behind this. Rage builds up inside him. Without hesitation, he storms into the school and directly attacks Billy. In the scuffle, Billy accidentally falls against the school's heater, burning his ear. Seeing what he has done, Cole panics and runs away. Anne follows Cole as he runs away, overcome with emotions. He confesses that he feels like he doesn't belong in this world and can't bear to live in it anymore. Anne, deeply moved, reassures him that things will get better and urges him not to give up. Her words give him a glimmer of hope. Miss Stacy, feeling guilty after hearing about Anne's wooden house and Cole, apologizes. She admits that since her arrival, things have only become more complicated. With the Progressive Mothers group strongly against her, she believes leaving might be the best option. Despite her efforts to provide modern education, it seems impossible in such a conservative environment. She reveals that the school board is closely watching her and could dismiss her any time. Anne, hearing this, becomes emotional. Meanwhile, Gilbert, feeling lonelier than ever, visits his father's grave and shares how lost he feels now that Bash has also left. On the other hand, Bash, now in Bog, develops feelings for a woman named Brown, and she reciprocates. He starts spending more time at her house, but one evening, as he returns home, he sees Brown embracing another man and kissing his cheek. Heartbroken, he misunderstands the situation and runs away. Brown, realizing his mistake, chases after him to explain, but he doesn't listen. Unbeknownst to him, the man is actually her son, Elijah. The next day, Anne and some students go to town to plan a way to save Miss Stacy. There, they unexpectedly run into Gilbert, who is looking for Bash. Eventually, Gilbert meets Miss Brown, who explains the misunderstanding. She reveals that Bash left thinking she was involved with another man, but that man was actually her son. She hesitated to tell him because her son was born out of wedlock, fearing Bash wouldn't accept it. Realizing the mistake, they set out to find him. They finally find Bash at a small laundry house where Miss Brown clears up the confusion. Overwhelmed and slightly drunk, Bash impulsively proposes. To everyone's delight, she accepts. In that moment, Gilbert takes out an official document, making Bash his equal partner with 50% farm ownership. He then announces that he will stay to help Bash with farming instead of leaving for school. Both are overjoyed. Meanwhile, at the Grand Hall, a vote is being held on Miss Stacy's future. Just before the decision, she arrives and defends herself, explaining that she came to educate with modern knowledge but is now being cast out. Anne steps forward with a potato-powered light bulb, demonstrating Miss Stacy's innovative teaching. She argues that teachers like her help them keep up with a rapidly advancing world. Marilla supports Anne, stating Avonlea must not fall behind. Even Rachel, once against progress, agrees. The crowd is convinced, and they vote to keep Miss Stacy at the school. The next day, Bash and Miss Brown get married in a small church. Anne, Gilbert, and all their friends are there to celebrate. After the wedding, Anne and Gilbert talk. He shares that he has decided not to leave Avonlea and fully dedicate himself to finishing school so he can pursue medicine in the future. For now, he wants to spend time with his family. Hearing this, Anne reveals her own dream, to become a teacher like Miss Stacy. Anne rides a beautiful horse through the white snow, fully enjoying the cold breeze and the peaceful atmosphere. She eventually reaches a snow-covered field where her school friends are playing hockey. Excitedly, she asks the girls why they aren't keeping score, as she has recently started writing articles and wants to write about the game. Meanwhile, 2 Indian people arrives, selling hockey sticks to the schoolboys. Anne, always curious, starts talking to them and expresses her desire to write an article about them so people can learn about their culture. Since they understand little English, their daughter Kaquet translates and asks her father what an article is. Anne explains that she will ask questions and write about them to share their story. Her father refuses, but Kaquet argues that if people learn about them, their sticks will sell even more. Eventually, she gives Anne their home address before leaving with her father. Later, Anne follows the directions and reaches Kaquet's home. She eagerly asks questions, and Kaquet happily explains their way of life. They spend time together, and at one point, Kaquet braids Anne's ponytail, strengthening their bond. Back home, Anne excitedly shares her experience with Marilla, who reacts harshly. She warns Anne to stay away from Indians, calling them aggressive and unpredictable. However, Anne ignores her words and remains firm in her belief. That evening, Matthew, Marilla, and Anne share a quiet dinner. Later in her room, Anne reflects on how she used to be a little girl who only wished to be beautiful. She prays for forgiveness, as now her only desire is to live a life full of adventures which she finds truly exciting. She hopes to always be happy. The next morning, Anne and Diana walk to school together. Diana is preparing for a course in Paris on becoming a good wife, while Anne is focused on Queen's College. They make a pinky promise to write each other letters and cherish their remaining days together. At school, they find Ruby in tears. A new trend has started where girls write the names of boys they like on the notice board, and if the boy reciprocates, he walks the girl home. Ruby is upset because Gilbert hasn't written her name. Anne, noticing this, talks to Gilbert and suggests he write it, but he refuses, saying he has no interest in her. When Anne tells Ruby, she refuses to accept the rejection. Convinced that Gilbert must like her because he looked at her while Anne was speaking. Lost in her fantasy, she ignores the truth. Miss Stacy starts the lesson by asking students to share about their family heritage. When Anne's turn comes, she describes her family as a mystery, calling herself an orphan. Miss Stacy continues with others, but later meets Anne privately, assuring her she can speak up if anything felt hurtful. Anne insists life with Matthew and Marilla is wonderful, and they love her dearly. Miss Stacy suggests orphanage records might have clues about her parents, but Anne admits she has thought about it for a long time and feels confused. The next morning is her 16th birthday. She wakes up excited, expecting a surprise, but everything seems normal and disappointment creeps in. Noticing this, Matthew and Marilla quickly bring out a homemade cake. Seeing it, her heart fills with joy. They celebrate together, and Matthew gives her a precious gift, bringing tears to her eyes. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she thanks him sincerely. Later, she expresses her wish to learn about her family's lineage, which means she has to visit orphanage. Marilla, hearing this, feels uneasy. Fear of losing her makes her hesitant, so she immediately refuses and postpones the conversation. Just then, Diana arrives, looking worried. Her little sister, Minnie May, has fallen sick again. In reality, she had also planned a surprise. Concerned, she rushes to Diana's house, only to find another surprise waiting. All the girls have gathered, making the moment even more special. The lively atmosphere fills the room as they enjoy the celebration, sharing laughter and stories. When she returns home at night, Matthew and Marilla are already waiting. Once again, she brings up the conversation. This time, they reveal that they have thought about it and decided to let her go with Cole, which now lives with Aunt Josephine, to find information about her family history. Overjoyed, she expresses her gratitude repeatedly. However, Marilla still feels a weight in her heart, fearing she might lose her forever. Sensing her unease, Matthew gently reminds her that they can never hold her back. She deserves the freedom to explore and make her own choices. Anne and Gilbert board the train together. Gilbert is also traveling for his medical apprenticeship, while Anne plans to continue with Cole to visit the asylum. Marilla keeps reminding Gilbert to take care of Anne, making him feel slightly guilty. When they reach their destination, Gilbert drops Anne off at Aunt Josephine's house, where Cole is already staying after leaving his house forever. Before leaving, Gilbert reassures Anne, hoping she finds the answer she's looking for. As soon as Cole steps outside and sees her, his face lights up with happiness. He shares that he received her letter, read all of it, and is adjusting well. The art scene there is incredible. Later, Anne meets Aunt Josephine and then sets off with Cole to visit the asylum. The moment she steps inside, memories of the past flood her mind. When she finally meets the matron and asks about her family, the response shatters her hopes. The woman coldly explains that many years ago, rats destroyed all the documents, leaving nothing behind. Even if she had the information, she wouldn't share it. Heartbroken, Anne walks away, tears streaming down her face. Then a thought strikes her, her letters. She rushes to retrieve them, reading through every word. Doubts creep into her mind. What if everything she imagined about her parents was just a fantasy? What if they abandoned her? What if no one ever truly loved her? Emotionally overwhelmed, she breaks down. Cole gently comforts her, reminding her that her imagination isn't a weakness. It's what helped her survive and dream big. He assures her that her parents must have loved her deeply. His words bring her some peace, and she finally admits that while she has found some answers, the visit has only raised more questions. Perhaps it would have been better if she had never come. Cole stays by her side, offering quiet support as she processes her emotions. Meanwhile, Gilbert goes on a date with Miss Rose, another apprentice under Dr. Ward. They meet at a tea house, where she subtly teaches him about dating etiquette and ethics. As they talk, a mutual attraction grows between them. After the date, Gilbert reunites with Anne, and together, they board the train back to Avonlea. Anne excitedly tells Marilla that she found all the answers she was looking for and sincerely thanks her for allowing her to go. However, she admits that she didn't discover much and wants to return next week to check the church records. Matthew agrees without hesitation, but Marilla remains silent, disliking the idea. That night, Anne prays to God, asking for guidance in finding her parents and learning about her family. Marilla overhears her, and a deep sadness settles in. The thought of Anne leaving them one day weighs heavily on her heart. On the other side, Gilbert stays with Bash and his wife, Miss Brown, along with their infant daughter. Miss Brown takes good care of Gilbert and Bash, and when she finds a rose in Gilbert's pocket, she realizes he has been on a date. This makes her quite happy for him. However, in the following days, Miss Brown falls seriously ill. Bash, worried, leaves their child with Matthew, asking him to take care of her while he takes her to the doctor. Matthew gently looks after the baby, while Gilbert, deeply concerned, takes Miss Brown to Dr. Ward for a checkup. Meanwhile, Anne and Marilla visit them, helping with household chores. After the checkup, Gilbert receives heartbreaking news. Miss Brown has been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and she only has a few days left to live. Bash is devastated upon hearing this, completely shattered. When Gilbert informs Miss Brown, she is deeply saddened and immediately asks to see her daughter. Marilla and Matthew quickly bring the child to her. Gilbert later confides in Anne, questioning the purpose of becoming a doctor if he cannot save lives. Anne gently reminds him that loss is a part of life and that, over time, he will learn to endure it. However, she encourages him never to give up despite the pain. Meanwhile, Miss Brown speaks to Anne, requesting her to always take care of her child and tell her about her mother as she grows up. Anne suggests that she write a letter for her, something she can read when she is older, to understand her mother's love and thoughts. Miss Brown finds the idea beautiful and starts writing. Seeing this, Anne reflects on her own longing, wishing she could have just one moment to speak with her parents under the moonlight. After that, Miss Brown speaks with Gilbert, thanking him sincerely for giving them a home and treating them like family. Gilbert becomes emotional again, and before parting, she makes one last request. She wishes to see her elder son, Elijah, one final time. The last time Elijah was at Gilbert's house, he had stolen Gilbert's things and run away. Because of that, Gilbert hesitates for a moment, but seeing Miss Brown's condition, he agrees to bring him back. He returns to the bog to search for Elijah, asking around, but no one gives him a clear answer. One person finally tells him that Elijah was seen there a few days ago, but has now left for another city permanently. Realizing there is nothing more he can do, Gilbert thanks the man who, in reality, has lied to him to prevent further trouble. Back in Avonlea, everyone comes together to prepare for Easter celebrations. They plan a special farewell for Miss Brown, ensuring that her final days are filled with warmth and respect. Since she used to work at the town's laundry house, many of her old colleagues attend, making her feel truly cherished. Surrounded by love, she spends her remaining days in peace, knowing that she is deeply cared for. After that, Anne tells Marilla again about going to the church records to find out more about her family. But this time, Marilla gets upset and strictly forbids her from doing so. Shocked and hurt, Anne storms out of the house and runs to the barn where Matthew finds her. She tearfully tells him that Marilla doesn't want her to find her past because she doesn't truly love her. She feels like she will never belongs, and that Marilla is just keeping her in place rather than accepting her. Matthew listens patiently and tells her to give it some time, assuring her that things will get better. But Anne, still heartbroken, says time will indeed fix everything because in a few months, she will leave and never come back. That way, neither she nor Marilla will have to struggle with each other anymore. Hearing this, Matthew is deeply saddened. He returns home and talks to Marilla, making her realize that instead of keeping Anne close, she is pushing her away. He warns her that if she keeps controlling Anne like this, she will lose her forever. Marilla, shaken by his words, finally understands, and after much thought, gives Anne permission to continue her search. Meanwhile, after Miss Brown's passing, the letter she wrote for her elder son, Elijah, is finally being sent to him. Bash goes to find him and deliver it personally. Anne is at the house when he leaves, preparing for her own journey. When Bash meets Elijah, he informs him about his mother's death and tells him she wanted to see him one last time. But Elijah, appearing indifferent, coldly says that she was bound to die someday. Hearing this, Bash is furious. His anger explodes and a heated argument turns into a physical fight. In the scuffle, Elijah lands a heavy punch, knocking Bash to the ground. On the other hand, Gilbert and Rose grow even closer. They go on another date, and after returning, they find Bash already at the clinic, injured. Without wasting time, both immediately tend to his wounds and provide him with first aid. Meanwhile, Anne finally arrives at the church and learns about her parents. She is overwhelmed with joy to discover that she is of Scottish descent. Tears fill her eyes as she realizes she finally has a piece of her past. However, on her way back, she visits a Christian school where Caquet was enrolled during a recent Christian program in Avonlea. The program placed Indians girls, especially in the church, to teach them local customs. Anne rushes to meet Caquet, but one of the sisters refuses to let her in. Anne pleads, saying she only wants to talk for a moment and will leave immediately. But despite her request, she is turned away. Heartbroken, she walks away. But inside the church, the reality is far worse. Indians' children are treated cruelly, practically imprisoned, and forbidden from leaving. Later, Anne returns home and Marilla asks how her visit to the church went. Anne shares everything she discovered about her parents, explaining that they died just a week apart. Despite the sadness, she feels a sense of relief. Marilla, deeply moved, reassures her that it wasn't her fault and comforts her. Anne also excitedly shares that her Scottish heritage explains why her hair is red. Hearing this, Marilla suggests they write letters to the village where Anne's parents were from, hoping to learn more about them. Anne agrees, saying it's a wonderful idea. After that, Marilla and Anne sit together to write a letter, carefully choosing their words. They address it to the authorities in Scotland, hoping to gather more information about Anne's parents. Once the letter is complete, Anne signs it with a mix of excitement and nervousness. With everything finalized, they send the letter, hoping it will bring answers about her past. Meanwhile, Rachel and Marilla visit Bash, offering their support after Brown's passing. They take turns helping with household chores and looking after Delphine Brown's daughter, but Rachel soon grows tired and bluntly tells Bash that he should remarry. She argues that winter is approaching, and without a partner, managing everything will be difficult. Marilla, however, feels it's too soon to discuss such things as the grief is still fresh. Rachel insists that facing reality early is better, then leaves. Bash, left in thought, starts considering her words. He later decides to write a letter to his mother, explaining everything and inviting her to come. Marilla encourages him, saying Brown would have wanted him to find stability and support. The next day at school, everyone is preparing for a dance. Anne and Gilbert join the practice, but things get awkward when most students struggle with the steps. Suddenly, a group of girls huddle together, whispering anxiously. They fear that dancing with boys might lead to pregnancy. Miss Stacy overhears them and immediately reassures them that such a thing is impossible. When the girls hesitantly ask how pregnancy actually happens, she carefully explains that it requires an intimate relationship, not just dancing. The discussion makes the students curious about health and relationships. In the evening, after returning home, Gilbert prepares for the supper and he turns to Bash with a question that has been bothering him. If he feels attracted to a girl, does that mean she's the one he should marry? Bash, amused by his confusion, tells him that attraction alone isn't enough. True love is what matters. Feelings can come and go, but love is what stays. Gilbert falls silent, deep in thought, as he tries to process Bash's words. Matthew and the rest of the family dress up nicely, excited for their trip to the circus. Anne, looking radiant, is equally thrilled. On the way, she talks to a horse, wondering if love is real or just a fantasy. The thought lingers in her mind as they finally reach the circus. There, she encounters a fortune teller, a fraud woman who makes strange predictions. She claims that the boy in Anne's life loves her. The words send a thrill through her, making her heart race. But as she looks around, she spots Gilbert arriving with Miss Rose and her family. Her excitement shatters in an instant, and emotions well up inside her. Feeling deceived, she confronts the fortune teller, calling her a fraud and demanding her money back. The woman, unfazed, clarifies that she never specified which boy loved Anne, just that someone did. Anne, silenced by the response, walks away, lost in thought. Later, she presents the cake she baked for a competition. However, as soon as the judges taste it, they struggle to swallow, reacting with exaggerated discomfort. Laughter erupts among the crowd, embarrassing her deeply. Unable to bear it, she runs off, overwhelmed with humiliation. Wanting to lift her spirits, Matthew takes her on a ride in a hot air balloon. As they soar into the sky, the breathtaking view washes away her sorrow. The joy of the moment spreads to everyone around, filling the air with laughter and happiness. That night, everyone gathers in the grand hall for a lively dance. Laughter and music fill the air as they enjoy the evening. But outside, Billy corners Josie, trying to force himself on her. Panicked, she breaks free and rushes back inside. Instead of feeling ashamed, Billy boasts to his friends, claiming he has been with Josie. The false rumor spreads like wildfire, poisoning the atmosphere. When Anne hears about it, anger surges through her. She confronts Billy in front of everyone, demanding to know why he is spreading such disgusting lies. Instead of backing down, he mocks her too, sneering that if she wants a kiss, she should just ask. The room buzzes with whispers about Josie, their words filled with judgment. Overwhelmed, she flees, unable to bear the humiliation. Seeing her friend suffer, Anne feels both furious and heartbroken. Determined to fight back, she pours her emotions into an article, writing about women's dignity and their right to be respected. The next day, Anne distributes copies of her article outside the church, making sure the entire town of Avonlea gets to read it. People gather around, surprised and intrigued by the bold words printed on the paper. As the news spreads, Josie also comes across the article. Though Anne had written it in a general sense, avoiding names, Josie instantly realizes the topic is about her. Overwhelmed, she runs away, unable to face anyone. When Anne learns how hurt Josie Josie is, she rushes to talk to her, expecting to apologize. But instead, Josie slaps her, accusing her of ruining her reputation. Emotions flare as Josie yells that Anne had no right to share something so personal without asking her first. Later, Miss Stacy calls Anne aside. She acknowledges that Anne's intentions were right, but she should have considered the consequences before publishing something so sensitive. She explains that the church elders, being old-fashioned, have asked for the paper to be canceled. Miss Stacy tells Anne that despite her efforts to raise awareness, the reality is that women aren't allowed to speak up freely, and if they go against the system, they face consequences. Anne is left speechless, struggling to process the unfairness of it all. The next day, Miss Stacy informs the class that from now on, they can only write about farming, common events, and neutral topics. Anything controversial, especially about rights and social issues, is strictly forbidden. The entire class is shocked. Anne, who had passionately written about human rights and especially women's rights, realizes how deeply society resists change, leaving her both frustrated and heartbroken. Later, when Anne arrives at the barn, Jerry is already there. He hesitates before asking if a girl who loves someone but refuses to acknowledge him in public is disrespecting him. Anne, surprised by the question, firmly states that love should be expressed openly, and hiding it is unfair. That's when Jerry reveals that the girl is Diana. He confesses that she hasn't even told her best friend about them because she fears society's judgment due to his lower-class background. Anne is furious, realizing Diana kept such an important secret. Later, when Diana secretly comes to meet Jerry, Anne confronts her. She demands to know why she hid their relationship and why she lied. She insists that love should never be something to be ashamed of. The confrontation turns heated, and in the end, Anne and Diana decide to part ways as friends, both deeply hurt by the argument. The next day, Anne refuses to accept defeat regarding the newspaper. She comes up with a bold plan and gathers the people of Avonlea, urging them to stand together. They all head to the Grand Hall, where a meeting is already taking place with ministers and elders discussing the town's affairs. Standing her ground, Anne declares that they will not stay silent, because freedom of expression is their fundamental right. The ministers are taken aback by her courage. Though they reluctantly agree to reinstate the newspaper, it's clear they are displeased, and tension remains. As the situation escalates, Anne and the others rush to the school, only to find it completely burned down. The printing press is missing, and everything lies in ruins. Witnessing the destruction, Miss Stacy is outraged, declaring this as an even greater attack on their rights. She vows that they will not stay silent, determined to expose the culprits behind this injustice. Meanwhile, Diana meets Jerry for the last time. She returns all his belongings and tells him that, despite their deep bond, they can never truly be together. Her family, especially her parents, would never approve. Besides, she is leaving for Paris, making their separation inevitable. The next day, the students take their entrance exams for college admission. Anne, feeling confident, leaves home in high spirits. However, the atmosphere at the exam hall is tense. Finally, they complete their exams and graduate. That evening, they celebrate at a party, where Diana also shows up. Everyone enjoys the night, drinking and having fun. During the party, Gilbert finally asks Anne directly if she has any feelings for him. Confused and overwhelmed, she hesitates before saying that his future lies with Rose, as she is stable and knowledgeable in medicine. She walks away, leaving Gilbert disappointed. On the other side, Caquette finally reunites with her family. Meanwhile, Anne is lost in thoughts, filled with guilt over how she handled things. Later, Diana visits her and apologizes, admitting she made a terrible mistake. They reconcile and promise to stand by each other once again. Anne then confides in Marilla, revealing that Gilbert proposed to her, but she turned him down. Marilla gently reminds her that mistakes are a part of life, but some should not be repeated. She advises Anne to follow her heart before it's too late. Determined, Anne rushes to Gilbert's house, but instead of him, Bash's mother greets her. With a heavy heart, she informs Anne that Gilbert has already left. Anne decides to write a heartfelt letter to Gilbert, finally confessing her feelings. She leaves the letter on the dining table before leaving. Meanwhile, the church officials launch attack on the Indians' village, forcibly taking Caquette away again. They fire shots at anyone trying to resist. In desperation, Caquette's parents arrive at Anne's house pleading for help. Marilla is hesitant, believing interference might make things worse. However, when Caquette's father is shot and collapses, they finally agree to assist. Anne recalls the distant school where Caquette was taken, as she had visited once before, though the nuns had refused to let her meet her friend. Matthew believes there might be a misunderstanding and insists they must go and rescue Caquette. The next day, when Gilbert returns home, he finds Bash and his mother in a heated argument. Unnoticed, he quietly enters through the back door and heads to his room. So, he remains unaware of Anne's letter. On the other hand, Matthew and the others reach the Christian school, demanding Caquette's release. However, the officials refuse, declaring that no one is allowed to meet the children. Matthew warns them that if they do not release her immediately, they will involve higher authorities. Just then, a nun appears, stating that only the priest has the authority to grant access to the children, but he won't return for another 14 days. Caquet's parents refuse to leave and decide to wait there, while Matthew and Anne are sent back home. As Matthew and Anne leave, the priest suddenly arrives with the police, threatening to arrest Caquet's parents if they do not leave immediately. Left with no choice, they are forced to retreat. Back home, Marilla is relieved to see Matthew safe and reassures Anne that Caquet will soon reunite with her parents. Then, she hesitantly shares shocking news. Diana mentioned that Gilbert is about to propose to Rose. Anne is stunned, struggling to process it. Marilla suggests he might never have seen the letter. Realizing this could mean love won't win, Anne breaks down, and Marilla comforts her. Determined for answers, Anne decides to confront him, refusing to believe he left without responding. But when she reaches his house, Bash tells her he has already left for Charlottetown. Gilbert meets Rose and, without hesitation, tells her the truth. He doesn't love her. His heart belongs to Anne, and it's better to end things now rather than break off the engagement later. Rose is furious, demanding to know if Anne loves him back. When Gilbert reveals that Anne rejected his proposal, her anger intensifies. She questions whether she wasn't even worthy of his love. Gilbert reassures her that she is an incredible person, but he would never truly appreciate her the way she deserves because his heart is elsewhere. He encourages her not to feel less about herself, praying that she will find great success in life. Calming down, Rose makes him promise not to reveal this breakup until she is settled and moves abroad, as she doesn't want to face humiliation. Gilbert agrees. The next day, everyone gathers at school, anxiously waiting for their entrance exam results. One by one, they discover that they have all been accepted, filling the air with joy and celebration. Amidst the excitement, Anne and Gilbert share a brief moment of eye contact but say nothing. Anne grows frustrated. Why didn't he speak to her? Why was he just standing there silently? Later, Gilbert visits Anne's home and quietly leaves a note in Anne's room. In it, he finally expresses his love clearly, admitting that he let her go but couldn't stop thinking about her. Along with the letter, he also returns the pen she had once given him. Anne returns home exhausted, but as soon as she enters her room, she notices Gilbert's letter. Frustration surges through her. Why couldn't he have faced her and said it directly? Instead, he left a letter. Anger takes over, and she rips it into pieces, tossing them out of the window. But the moment she does, doubt creeps in. What if he actually confessed his love? Panic-stricken, she rushes outside, frantically gathering the torn pieces. However, from the words she can piece together, it only seems like he doesn't love her and plans to marry someone else. A deep sense of betrayal washes over her, and without wasting any more time, she shifts her focus to the future. She heads to Charlottetown, visiting hostels and preparing for her new life. As she finalizes her departure, she unexpectedly runs into Rose. Rose congratulates her on Gilbert's supposed engagement, leaving Anne utterly confused. Realization dawns. Anne doesn't know the truth. Without hesitation, Rose tells her everything, clearing up the misunderstanding. Shocked, Anne rushes back, hurriedly packing her things. Just as she steps outside, Gilbert is there, waiting. They lock eyes, emotions overwhelming them, and finally, they confess their love for each other. Their words are filled with relief, joy, and longing. Overcome with happiness, they share a sweet kiss, sealing their feelings. At that moment, Matthew and Marilla arrive, witnessing their happiness. As if fate planned it, Anne's mother's book is found, the one she left behind. Inside, her mother's notes reveal her love for flowers and the things that brought her joy. It's a deeply emotional moment, connecting Anne to her roots in a way she never expected. The season closes with Anne sitting in front of the mirror, reflecting on everything that has led her here. With a newfound sense of belonging, she writes in her letter, "She looks like her mother.